Overseas voting ends as Turkey gears up for Sunday's presidential runoff between President Erdogan and opposition leader Kemal Kilicdaroglu. As the country waits Turkey's next parliament Readies to get to work, what direction could the 600-seat body go? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. Voting overseas has wrapped up for Turkish citizens ahead of Sunday's presidential runoff between President Erdogan and challenger Kemal Kilicdaroglu. Although the first round of voting on May 14 fell short of producing a clear winner, the Turkish parliament for the next 5 years has been settled. President Erdogan's AK Party will be leading the charge, having secured 268 seats. Together with their MHP allies, the People's Alliance have a comfortable majority in the 600-seat body. They are followed by the main opposition, Republican People's Party, with 169 seats, and the left-wing Yesil Sol Party, which came third. This year's parliamentary elections also saw a record number of women candidates, with 121 securing seats, an all-time high. Meanwhile, candidates from smaller parties have also entered parliament, thanks to an alliance system that allowed them to bypass previous election thresholds. So what impact will new faces have on Parliament, and what direction will the legislative body go? And to further discuss the upcoming runoff and the makeup of the next Parliament, joining me now from Ankara is Ahmet Keser. He is an associate professor at Hasan Kalyoncu University, and from Istanbul, Aylin Ünver, she is a professor at Haliç University. Also, Tarık Çerkavi, he is the manager of the TRT World Research Center. A warm welcome to you all, and thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Aylin, it's been almost 2 weeks since Turkish citizens went to the polls to elect a new president and parliament. What's the mood right now ahead of the runoff?
Actually, I would like to remind the audience that this is the new election in terms of after the transition from parliamentary system to presidential system, because previously we didn't have the runoff. So this is a new experience for the voters. So. And at the first round, none of the candidates, as you know, that obtained the majority votes. That's why this runoff will be held on Sunday. And because of the close of the votes led to second round off, and so this runoff would be one of the contested one, because the previous one was very. There was a higher turnout, and we are also expecting the same turnout, turnout from this one as well.
So, Ahmet, although this is Turkey's first presidential runoff, it is no stranger to close elections. Was there an election in Turkey's recent past that you can compare this one to in terms of how close it is and the interest both at home and abroad?
When we look at the interest abroad, I think the last 2 presidential elections they have taken much more interest. But when comparing especially the seats in the parliament, I think only we can look at the 2002 elections. Only in that elections, for example, AK Party has received 34% votes, but in the assembly, they got, I think, more than 60-70% of the seats in that time. The distribution of the seats were in a different manner, but the votes were close to this one. Other than that, in none of the elections, AK Party has received less than 40% till these elections. In these elections also, even Erdogan kept his votes close to 50%. We have seen that the votes taken by AK Party has just turned to its starting point.
Yes.
So I think this has to be questioned by the party members and others. Other than that, in 2002 elections, there was Doğru Party, which receives around 9%, 9 point something, and National Movement Party again, both between around 10%. Now, I think E Party replaced Doğru Party instead of that one. Other than that, there is no change, almost similar votes.
So,
yeah.
Okay, Tarık, I want to continue with you. How far has Turkey come since its first multi-party elections, which were held in July 1946? How much has it evolved in the last 77 years?
Well, it's clear that we are witnessing a great evolution for Turkish democracy. We have seen, of course, like there were periods where there was some interference and meddling by the military. But we can say that in the past 20 years, there has been growth in the democratic discourse and the participation levels that are really top in the world show this pattern that there is a growth, that there is a lot of civism, political civism in Turkey, in which all the people participate and put their votes, and they are very interested into the democratic debates and the political participation. So I think it's a plus for Turkey. I mean, the main winner, to be honest, in this is Turkey's democracy.
So while the country waits to elect the president, Turkey's next parliament has been set. I just want to bring up a graphic showing the makeup of the next parliament. So what's different this time is that previously, for a party to field one of its candidates into parliament, it needed to pass the 7% threshold. But thanks to the alliance system, small parties like Yeniden Refah and the Türkiye İşçi Partisi were able to get several seats despite getting less than 3% of votes. So, Aylin, my question is, how will this change the atmosphere in parliament, and what impact or influence could these small parties have now going forward?
Absolutely, it would make the Turkish Grand National Assembly more democratic because decreasing the threshold to 7% is the aim of this, to make the parliament more democratic, to give a chance to more parties to able to enter the parliament. So also the alliance system make the same, even the parties who are below to 3% or 5%. So this is a good for Turkish democracy. Of course, they will have a chance to give voice their demands, and the people's or supports their wish. And so this is an important development in terms of Turkish democracy. And of course, it will not be in terms of legislation process. It will be a little bit difficult because there are parties which has different stance towards domestic and foreign policy issues. So time to time, it would be difficult to take decisions. But in terms of democracy and democratic representation of Turkish people, that's a good opportunity, and it's a good picture.
So, Ahmet, what do you think? Is it going to be harder or let's say we are now seeing a diversified parliament. So will this diversification make things easier or harder, as Aylin mentioned, when it comes to passing legislature?
I think as the citizens learned more about democratic maturity, the politicians should learn as well. And there is a transition from antagonism to agonism, which is instead of conflictual relations, I think the politicians will also learn to go into competitive relations. And yes, there is not a consensual system, because in the United States, the parties has a overall consensus on the system. But in Turkey, we have almost from all locations of the ideological spectrum, we have representatives. So for representation, it is good to have different parties in the parliament. But of course, they have to learn consociation. So they will compromise, they will negotiate, of course. But maybe this will be better for at least satisfaction of all the parties, all the sides, even the minorities. Everybody will have some, more or less, some representatives in the assembly. So for representation perspective, it is good.
Yes.
For stability, it might create some problems, of course.
So, Tarık, what do you think? I mean, how do you see the current political landscape in parliament? I mean, will they have a considerable influence or oversized influence?
Well, I think the situation right now is very favorable because it's a presidential system. So the president has lots of executive powers, but nonetheless, he needs to rely on a strong parliament. The fact that the People's Alliance have the majority, even though this is not like an overwhelming majority, but it's a good majority to govern. Mm-hmm. So I think the pieces are good there to proceed and move forward the country towards a good direction in terms of economy, foreign policy, etc. And there remains, of course, areas of debate because the parliament is still has a lot of other voices that could at any time object to any policies and discussion would take place.
So Aylin, this question is for you. This year's parliamentary elections also saw a record number of women entering the 600-seat body. 121, or about 1/5 of seats, will be occupied by women. What kind of a difference could they make?
Actually, first of all, I would like to remind the historical I would like to give the history, because the social and economic rights of women are given by civil law in 1926, and also Turkish women started to be represented in the parliament as of 1934. So even before many developed countries. So that's not the new case. But in terms of number, it remained low historically, but in that election, again, the woman representative at the parliament, number of them increased. As you said, is 121 women occupied the seats of the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Of course, this is an important for women, not just for women, to also have a woman perspective on many issues in the parliament, not just representing the women's rights or the demand of women in the parliament, but at the same time having a woman perspective on many issues from foreign policy to domestic policy. So that's an important achievement that the woman representative made in the parliament this year.
So one area I want to move to is polling data before the elections and how many of the country's leading polling companies were so off. I'm just going to pull up some numbers to contrast how close and off some were. So, for example, Optimar was the closest, being within half a point in predicting both Erdogan's and Kilicdaroglu's numbers. Betimar was next, missing by a small margin. But on the other hand, polling companies like ORC and Avrasya were the least accurate. Both predicted Kemal Kilicdaroglu getting over 50%, which ended up being nearly 6 points from the actual results. And while Erdogan's numbers were also off by between 5 and 6 points. And these are not the only ones. Many companies were far from the final numbers. Out of the 23 polling companies we looked at, more than 85% were off by 2 to 6 points. Only 14% were within 1 to 2 points of the results. So, Ahmet, what does this tell us about the accuracy of the polls across Turkey, and how significant is this?
I think there should be at least two problems we see regarding the opening companies, public opening companies. The first is about their statistical sampling method. Because if you are trying to have a sample from the whole population, this sample should represent all the layers of the community, all the cities, all genders, and etc. I think they didn't take this issue into consideration. The second, we see that if that company is working with one of the political parties, those companies are trying to provide some results which show that the parties which they are in cooperation with is ahead. Mm-hmm. They are trying to show that one. So this takes them from being objective to another subjective position. And this, of course, destroys the trust on the public opinion companies. That's why I think they should be very careful about this. Of course, in American elections also, we have witnessed the same things. This is also used to motivate or direct the votes as well.
Yes.
Because in some cases, some of the parties may try the voters not to go to polls. Yes. Because they are at the head, etc. So this is also used for some purposes.
But Tarek, should there be regulations put in place for pollsters in a bid to stem disseminating inaccurate information which can directly impact voter turnout?
Yeah, I do believe that some regulations should be enforced, because right now we see a lot of connections between parties and those polling companies. I think they are directly financing these polls, and this causes problems in terms of public sphere and the integrity of the numbers, because polling is also it's a tool to influence the voters, because once you release polls before elections, like 2 weeks before elections or 3 weeks, and saying that this candidate will have such and such, and this candidate will have such and such, this becomes a political tool. So if we want to preserve the integrity of the public sphere and preserve the honesty of these numbers, and allow researchers and also politicians to have a good grip of what's happening on the ground, we need to have solid numbers coming from these polls, and not, as you have rightly said, a lot of discrepancies in the numbers, in the polling methodologies, and so on and so forth. So to your point, yes, I do think that we, in Turkey, we need to revise and review the procedures and legislation in place, and probably look at the ownership and the direct bias relationship between those polling companies and political parties.
So, Aylin, not only the Turkish polling companies, but several Western countries also misinterpreted the process. What do you make of it, and what do you make of the Western narrative in the run-up to the elections on May 14th?
It can be misinterpreted or misread, the election and also the situation in Turkey, or they might wanted to see where do they look at the Turkey. It depends on totally to their stance towards Turkey, how they perceive the Turkey and the voters and the Turkish citizens and their voting behavior. So it's totally related to this, and so that's why that at that point it couldn't reflect the reality, and also this misperception and led to misinterpretation and misread of the election in Turkey 2023.
So, Ahmet, why do you think the Western media misread Turkey's elections, and how well do they do usually when it comes to reading Turkey's internal political climate?
I think we can read this through the actors which they are in connection with. Because usually when we look at the foreign media, they are expected to be connected with so highly educated people, or from only some sectors of the community. So for them, it is really difficult to read, for example, what those people who live in the villages or urban places think, or how they will vote. So that's why I think they may have only the perspectives of some elite or intellectual or some high educated people, or only in some sectors of the cities maybe. So that's why this misdirect them while interpreting the results. And also, I think they are also misreading the issue regarding the national differences as well. Because in Turkey, for example, if there is any dilemma between security problems and economy, it is like the security and freedom in the West, then of course the people uses their votes regarding the security part.
Yes.
So I think that also mislead the Western countries as well.
So, Tarek, many Turkish political parties have campaigned on repatriating millions of Syrian refugees in Turkey back to their home countries. How do you think Europe is viewing that option?
Well, unfortunately, like you said, the situation of refugees has become a punching ball in the recent election campaign, with many parties just outbidding each other about how they're gonna fast and furiously repatriate those refugees. I think they unfortunately, a lot of the slogans, a lot of the things that were said, the promises, the pledges by different political parties, especially those who use the xenophobic card and far-right card, they have no idea about the agreements that are in place with the EU, and they were like signed agreements with these parties. So of course, Europe is very attentive to this debate, and there are, at the end of the day, there are agreements in place, and if any change, this should be again renegotiated between the two parties. So I don't think a lot of people internally here in Turkey have done a lot of research on that aspect, and I think Europe is definitely very nervous to see those attempts to renegotiate and replace the status quo.
So, Aylin, could these elections provide an opportunity for Turkey and the European Union to revamp their relations? I mean, what's next moving forward?
Actually, there are, as you know, that many disagreements between the EU and Turkey, and the most important situation, because Turkey is a candidate state to the EU, and our negotiation process de facto freezed. So maybe the new election and the result might let both sides to reconsider their approach towards each other. And also there are some steps started to be taken, for instance, from Turkish side, normalization of Turkey's relations with its neighbors. This is one of the conditions to become a member of the European Union. And also the other the condition to become a member of the Union is, as you know, that to achieve the Copenhagen political criteria. Turkey previously achieved enormous success in this democratic transformation. Maybe this return to democratic transformation might be achieved if only if the EU again provides Turkey a credible membership perspective instead of privileged partnership or other kind of perspective. But this not just only the values, but also at the same time the overlapping interests force both sides to work together, from energy issue to a refugee issue, as we are mentioned about the Syrian refugees and their repatriation to Syria. This is also the issue between EU and Turkey. So what we have achieved in this respect also helped them to solve this problem, because it led to many disagreements among the EU member states in 2015.
Okay, so Ahmet, Turkey's foreign policy and defense chiefs have recently talked about the roadmap for the repatriation of millions of Syrian refugees. How do you think this will play out, and do you believe there is a common ground?
I think whoever wins the elections, it doesn't matter. Turkey and the Turkish government should find a solution for this problem, because it is now every day becoming more and more serious and significant problem, because every action creates its own reaction in the community. As you mentioned earlier, for example, this refugee accumulation, their increase in the population, so every incident takes a huge place in the agenda and attracts more attention from the community. So that's why this also feeds the nationalist wing votes as well, as happened in all over Europe as well. So that's why I think Turkey has to find solutions, at least for the refugee issue, and also with normalizing the relations with neighbors, like which has already started with Greece after the earthquake issue, for example. So I think this is not just related with the government. Whoever wins, they should normalize this, I think.
So, Tarek, just this week, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar has said Turkey, Syria, Iran and Russia will establish a joint center in northern Syria to monitor the developments in this region. What's your take on this? And is a new page opening in the region?
Well, I think there is a positive momentum, definitely, that has been started like a couple of years ago. And the good relationship with Russia plays an integral part in facilitating those agreements and discussions and normalization of ties. So I think the momentum is there. There was a bit of wait and see because of the election. I think the Syrian regime is waiting to see who's the winner in order to hedge its bets. But I think overall the momentum is there. The normalization is going to take place. Now the details, the devil is in the details, and we'll see how this kind of details can be ironed out by the officials from different parts.
All right, Tariq, Aylin, and Ahmed, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.